promise of radiant health. In the late 1920s, Eben Byers was everything the era admired. Handsome, athletic, fabulously wealthy, at ease in the gilt dining rooms and winter resorts of America's upper crust. Golf championship, company, actresses and heiresses, sleeper train in 1927, it looked like a mere hiccup in a gilded life. That bruise set a fuse burning. A doctor, credible, reputable, and thoroughly impressed by a fashionable new tonic, recommended a product called Radithor, a tiny half-ounce bottle of radioactive water, sunshine, and vitality. The liquid itself was clear as a mountain spring. The science at a glance looked modern, even cutting edge, carefully prepared water to which a precise trace of radium had been added. The age, discovered by Marie and Pierre Curie, used in luminous paints, whispered about as a cure for cancer and a stimulant for flagging spirits. If X-rays could see through flesh, perhaps a softer glow could burn away fatigue and pain. Byers drank one bottle, then another, then many, many more. He liked how it made him feel, lively, warm, loose in the joints, newly convinced he was on the right side of progress. He gave bottles to friends. He sang its praises at clubs and dinner tables. Of bottles and then still more, ultimately more than 1,000 by some tallies, each one seeding his bones with a slow, unstoppable death. In 1932, aged 51, Eben Byers died, jawbones so necrotic that surgeons had removed large sections, lead-lined coffin. Decades later, exhumation would confirm what his doctors suspected. The radiation remained, an eerie signature trapped within the calcium lattices of a ruined skeleton. Clocks. Quick appetite for the new. How swiftly we can be seduced by a scientific buzzword, a charismatic salesman, a glowing promise. The other clock is geologic. Radium's half-life and the slow chemistry of bones, a damage that accumulates quietly, invisibly, and then all at once. Drank radioactive water until his jaw fell apart, and the world that helped him do it. The cult of radium. To understand Byers, you have to understand us, or at least the we of the 1910s and 1920s. Laboratory curiosities to street lamps and home appliances within a generation. Peer through flesh. Radium, announced by the Curies in 1898, seemed to fuse mystery with utility. It glowed faintly in the dark, warmed your hand, killed tumors in small doses, and lent an otherworldly luminescence to watch dials and instrument panels. It felt like bottled modernity, ethereal, intangible, vibrant. Advertisers noticed. Radioactive toothpaste, soap, facial creams, even corsets and jockey straps impregnated with emanators, porous ceramics laced with radium water or the body. These wares in scientific trappings, laboratory glass, guarantees, tables of microcuries. Was young and honest scientists were indeed experimenting at hospitals, but in the market stalls, the nuance evaporated. Cancer cells, surely tiny doses must enliven healthy ones. The psychology here matters. Convinced people progress was a one-way escalator. Radium belonged to the escalator. So when William J. A. Bailey, a college dropout who styled himself a nuclear pioneer, began bottling Radithor, he knew he was selling more than water. Future. Meet the medicine. What was in Radithor? Precision of a lab protocol. Triple distilled water with 1 microcurie each of radium-226 and radium-228 per bottle. That number did two things. First, it sounded chemically exact, which reassured Byers. Second, it implied that planners had thought deeply about safe dosing. They had not. Here is the essential mistake. Radium behaves like calcium inside the body of the ingested radium. The bloodstream whisks it along. The skeleton, hungry for calcium to maintain its constant remodel, quietly incorporates it. Once the radium lodges in bone, it sits inside the matrix like a tiny furnace. Emissions, radon and other progeny cascade after it. Skin or paper, but at sub-microscopic distances inside bone tissue and marrow, they are wrecking balls. They break DNA, damage the vasculature that nourishes bone, and trigger a chain of inflammation and death. Radiation safety principles, time, distance, shielding, are useless once the source is inside you. The dose becomes chronic, intimate, and inescapable. Your bones, vital, dynamic organs, pulsing with blood and bustling cells, turn into emission sites. Byers' initial injury was mundane, an arm knock that bothered him on the golf course. The prescribing doctor, like many contemporaries, sincerely believed in mild radium therapy. Byers took Radithor and felt better. Why? Placebo. Some was the natural ebb of an injury. Short-lived warmth and stimulation after drinking Radithor, likely the body's immediate stress response, akin to a jolt of strong coffee or a brisk plunge into cold water. Ritual. Half an ounce at a time, fear dissolving with each swallow. He escalated his intake. A bottle in the morning, perhaps one after lunch, maybe one more before bed. Soon it was habitual. Tried it too. Their enthusiasm reinforced his own. This social loop is crucial. Was currency. Byers' endorsement conferred legitimacy on Radithor, and Radithor's cultured packaging returned the favor by coding his choice as savvy. A classic feedback loop: belief, behavior, social proof, stronger belief. The body's revenge, radium poisoning, are subtle. Fatigue, headaches, anemia, vague bone pain. Then the teeth begin to ache. Dentist visits multiply. Extractions do not heal. Gums ulcerate. Breath smells foul as necrotic tissue decays. The maxilla, upper jaw, and mandible, lower jaw, are among the most metabolically active bones in the body. The intense remodeling that keeps teeth anchored also ferries in the most radium. By the time Byers' physicians realized what was happening, the damage had outrun any remedy. Surgical debridement, the removal of dead bone, offered only grim respite. Sections of his jaw were cut away, lesions appeared elsewhere. His blood counts sagged. His illness also sealed the verdict. The source was baked into his skeleton. Then to pull heavy elements from bone, no targeted antidote for alpha contamination. Palliation, and the gathering of a medical record that would later read like an indictment. On March 31st, 1932, the indictment ended with a death certificate. Glowing. The strange half-life of radium carries stories past their final period. Scientists, curious and unsettled, later tested his gravesite, warrant exhumation for study. Even decades later, the remains emitted radiation far above background. The signature of radium's decay chain persisted inside the mineralized tissues. Into a time capsule, a reminder that certain industrial mistakes cannot simply be outlived. Half-life with cheerfulness or luxury. You have to meet it with policy. William J. A. Bailey perfected a template we now recognize. Speak science, not superstition. Mimic the language of research without its discipline. Claim precision without publishing data. He called himself Doctor, despite never finishing college. Laboratories in East Orange, New Jersey, and paid for ads in reputable newspapers. Radithor's bottles listed potency. His brochures invoked physicians. Expensive. To the wealthy, this read as refinement. Regulators were behind. 1906 mostly targeted labeling fraud and adulteration. It did not require a showing of efficacy, and enforcement resources were thin. Could chase deceptive advertising, but cases took years. In that time, Bailey sold thousands of bottles. Byers' death changed the calculus. Consumer radium was dangerous. The tragedy of the radium girls, dial painters whose bones rotted after years of lip-pointing glowing brushes, had already stained the national conscience. But Byers was a society figure. The spectacle was impossible to ignore. Later distilled the saga into the blistering line. The radium water worked fine until his jaw came off. The punchline traveled farther than any technical paper. Regulator, too. Shortly afterward, Radithor disappeared from the market. Bailey's claims drew legal fire. The ad men backed away. To fix the underlying problem. In America, a manufacturer still didn't need to prove a drug was effective before selling it. Until the 1938 Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act, and then again after the 1962 Kefauver-Harris amendments brought modern standards of efficacy and informed consent. But it was a shove in the right direction. The physics in the bone's mechanism up close, because understanding it clarifies the moral of the story. Bone is alive. It remodels constantly, balancing osteoclasts, cells that chew old bone, with osteoblasts, cells that lay new bone. The calcium crystals that give bone its hardness are mined and replaced every day. Your skeleton is more like a coral reef under construction than a stone pillar. Because radium sits below barium in the periodic table and mimics alkaline earth metals, transport proteins that ferry calcium can also ferry radium. Once nestled into bone crystal lattices, the radium essentially becomes part of the reef, up close. External alpha sources can be blocked by skin. Internal sources sit millimeters from bone marrow stem cells. Each alpha particle is heavy and highly ionizing, carving tracks of damage through DNA. Decay chains multiply trouble. Radium-226 decays into radon-222, a noble gas that can diffuse locally. Its progeny, including polonium and lead isotopes, deliver further alpha and beta hits. It's not just one bullet, it's a volley over time. Dose and time compound. A single bottle might deliver only a modest burden. 1,000 bottles redefine the meaning of chronic exposure. This is why Radithor was so cruel. It exploited bone's biology, then handed the keys to physics. The social machinery of belief. Gullible millionaire, you'll miss the bigger lesson. Several systems chimed in harmony. Scientific halo. Early success in real radiation therapy lent a borrowed credibility to consumer radium. Between hospital protocols and patent medicine. Advertising modernity. The interwar marketing revolution spoke in the language of experts. White coats appeared in ads. Nomenclature crept onto labels. Advertising sounded like science. Consumers had no map. Professional ambiguity. Some physicians were genuinely curious about low-dose radiation. A few endorsed Radithor publicly. Authority diffused the risk. If a doctor recommends it, what harm? Class contagion. Social elites often act as taste setters. Byers' enthusiasm encouraged peers who trusted his judgment more than a government circular. Regulatory lag. When new technologies arrive, rules lag. Bold claims and plausible dangers. The 1920s were foolish. Vulnerable when novelty, status, and confusing science collide. Number of wellness trends or biohacks, and the melody sounds familiar. Echoes. The Radium Girls and the Cost of Glow. Case often gets told as a macabre curiosity, but its rhymes are darker. A decade earlier, teenage and 20-something women in New Jersey and Illinois painted watch dials with luminous paint. Brush tips fine by touching them with their lips. Dose of radium to the mouth, and the same terrible osteonecrosis of the jaw. Companies denied responsibility, then settled. Establish employer liability for occupational hazards and spurred stricter controls for radium handling. The symmetry is stark. In factories and ballrooms, radium found the same bones. That raised the brush wore a work apron or a tuxedo cuff. Physics is class blind. Public health shouldn't be. The FTC, the FDA, and the shape of prevention after Byers, the FTC sharpened its teeth on false therapeutic claims. The Food and Drug Administration, housed then in the Department of Agriculture, earned hard lessons about the difference between misbranding and proving a drug is safe and effective. Tragedy, the laws came late for Byers. Seem obvious. Pre-market clinical trials, good manufacturing practices, adverse event reporting, risk-benefit analyses exist because of a stack of cautionary tales. Sulfanilamide elixir deaths in 1937, thalidomide in the early 1960s, Vioxx in the 2000s. Byers sits on that shelf too. Charisma is not evidence, and that precision on a label is not the same as precision in a lab. The seduction of the quick fix radium, the lesson would be small. Hunger for a shortcut to vitality, youth, sexual vigor, athletic edge, to 19th century cocaine toothache drops, to post-war amphetamine tonics, to today's nootropic stacks and intravenous vitamin drips. A pattern emerges, produces genuine breakthroughs. Vocabulary to sell consumer products. The products offer immediate, subjective benefits and suppress discussion of risk and dose. Amplify testimonials of stifling innovation, lag behind. One in which harm is rare and delayed. Anecdotes, while the serious injuries are scattered and hard to attribute. By the time a pattern emerges, a generation of users may already be enrolled in an involuntary experiment. The autopsy of a fad radium craze, they usually point to 3 causes of death: evidence, regulation, and culture change. The miraculous claims. Credible physicians stopped recommending consumer radium. The FTC and related agencies squeezed advertising. The public ran out of patience. Meanwhile, radium's image darkened. The Radium Girls, cancers in industrial workers, newspaper cartoons of skeletons whispering, "Drink up." Radithor vanished first. Then similar emanator gadgets went from trinkets to trash. Off radium-laced bombs rewrote their catalogs. By the mid-1930s, the glamour had curdled to menace as building immunity. Cultural memory is short, a different lab coat. What survives of Eben Byers in tailored suits, Byers at the club, Byers with a winning athlete's posture, notes, lawsuits, and newspaper profiles? There is a grave lined with lead, minutes. People keep retelling because its final image, jawbone crumbling, vitality inverted, won't let go. Famous quip from the Wall Street Journal, the one that collapses tragedy into a single savage punchline. Then get a laugh or shiver. The presence of persuasive nonsense. So here is a different epitaph, drawn from the physics and the human pattern. When a remedy promises energy, youth, and potency in the same breath, read the fine print and then ask for the data behind the fine print. When a label dazzles with numbers, ask whether those numbers are connected to outcomes that matter, measured, replicated, published, scrutinized. Swears by something new. Remember Eben Byers, a man who was not stupid, not credulous by nature, not unadvised, and still fatally wrong. Coda, the two clocks, again display Radithor bottles, their glass catching the light like the clean promise of a mountain spring. Warn about alpha contamination. You can visit memorials to the Radium Girls and browse archives of FTC cases. Fast clock, of the years between 1900 and 1940, electric modernity, and then stumbled on enthusiasm. Elsewhere, radium-226's half-life is roughly 1600 years. In some distant century, when the details of interwar advertising have dissolved like paper in the rain, Byers will still be counting down, a faint metronome of our mistakes. That's not a horror to dwell on, it's a scale to respect. Some risks outlast critique, some bad ideas demand rules, not just warnings. Appetite for miraculous cures. Then it consumed him. Against science, but against theatrical science, the kind that borrows brilliance without earning it, the kind that sells you a glow when what you needed was a light.